All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Kasparian with you guys. I've got good news and I got bad news for you guys. Let's start with the bad news, at least for us. Well, for all of us who were trying to get progressive change. So for the first time, we did not hit our monthly goal in September. So it's gone. We're in October. Sad day for us. So we're trying to raise 200,000 every month this year at tyt.com/go. Keep the progressive message strong. Keep fighting for change and get word out there. And by the way, and so we've off to a good start in October though, 8,976 tyt.com/go. I'd love to make up that money that we couldn't get in September. I just want to, but seriously though, guys, I want to thank you. You guys don't know this, but we've been able to keep every employee through coronavirus, and you guys are a huge part of that. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So now, good news: Trump is doing disastrously in the polls. I'm gonna do more live videos about that, keep you updated on all the polls. So make sure you're checking that out on tyt.com. More good news. You remember how Trump lied about we're gonna plant 1 trillion trees? That's what he said a while back. Now it's down to we're gonna plant 1 billion trees. He hasn't planted a single tree. On the other hand, our sponsor Aspiration has already planted 2 million trees, also thanks partly to you guys. So everybody who signs up, they plant 10 trees. When you round up, they plant a tree for you rounding up. It's amazing service. So it's a good place to keep your money. It's actually a great place to keep your money and be progressive. So aspiration.com/TYT. And then tonight, a programming note, Ravi Patel from HBO Max new show, Pursuit of Happiness. He's also going to be in the new Wonder Woman, is going to be on tonight on Between Me and Uygur, twitch.tv/TYT. So check that out. I can't wait for that conversation. I've got a couple of thoughts about the Pursuit of Happiness. You guys are not going to be surprised by that, but it's going to be a great conversation. So that's at 8 o'clock Eastern, must see TV tonight on Twitch. All right, Casper, what do we got today?
All right, well, we start off with the election. In an effort to essentially skew the election in favor of Republicans by suppressing the vote, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has announced that several ballot drop-off sites throughout the state of Texas will be closed. And this is a reversal of an order that he had implemented in July, which essentially noticed that the coronavirus was going to ensure that more people were going to want to vote by mail. So he actually ordered more of these drop-off sites to open as a result. But now that it appears that Donald Trump and the Republican Party is facing tough re-election campaigns, Greg Abbott seems to be switching gears here. So counties will be limited to just one drop-off site where poll watchers designated by political parties and candidates must be allowed to observe ballot deliveries by voters. So this new order takes effect on Friday of this week, meaning that every county in Texas will only have one ballot drop-off place. Please vote early, please show up early, drop it off early, considering these changes that Greg Abbott is now implementing. A previous order though from July 27th was very different. So Abbott's July 27th order acknowledged the pandemic's danger by adding 6 days of early voting and waiving a state law that limits mail-in ballot drop-off to election day only. Limiting the number of drop-off sites will affect large urban counties that are strongly Democratic or trending in that direction. And the Texas Democratic Party said Abbott's new order appeared targeted at a rising Texas electorate. So that's what the situation is on the ground in Texas. This is what Republicans do. They know their ideas are unpopular, so they have to cheat to win. And so I'm curious to see how aggressively state Democrats are going to fight back against this. But if history, teaches us anything about Democrats, it's that they're weak and they, usually just release strong statements, but then don't follow up with real action. So with that said, again, vote early and make sure that your vote counts.
So if you're trying to figure out where and how to vote in your neck of the woods, tyt.com/vote gets you the information that you need. So check that out. Now, in this story, there's a couple of important things. Now, if you're wondering, why did Abbott bother opening up all those places to drop off mail-in votes in the first place? Don't Republicans hate mail-in voting? And so when he switches, it looks even uglier and more hypocritical? Well, that's because Republicans used to have an advantage in mail-in voting until political suicide bomber Donald Trump showed up at the scene and blew up the entire Republican Party. So tons of Republicans behind the scenes are now talking to the press going, make him stop. Why does he keep saying things against mail-in voting? It's a disaster. And remember, a lot of the Republican voters are older voters and they love mail-in voting. So in the beginning, the Republican Party in Texas is like, yeah, mail-in ballots, awesome, let's do it, yes, right? Now that Trump has devastated mail-in ballots on the Republican side and nobody's sending them in, and the Democrats are sending them in swarms, now they panic and go, oh, no, we didn't mean mail-in voting. No, because of something, we're gonna have to shut down almost all of the places where you can drop off your mail-in ballots. So what is that so-called something? We're gonna need poll watchers. There's not enough poll watchers at these polling locations. First of all, they're not polling locations. You just drop off your ballot. Polling locations are totally different. That's for a day of voting when you're actually going to vote at that location, not drop off your vote. So that's their very, very thin excuse. And say, oh, we just don't have enough staff. Really? You're the state of Texas, you have all the staff in the world. We don't have enough staff for poll watchers from both parties. I bet you Biden's team will get you plenty of people if you need them. And Trump says he's got 50,000 poll watchers all across the country. So look, we have to explain these things for two reasons. One, the media will not be clear with you guys. They'll say, oh, Abbott did this. No one knows why. They know why, they just don't want to tell you because of political correctness. They don't want to offend Republicans. And of course, Fox News and Republicans lie to you. In this case, they probably won't even bother because it's embarrassing to talk about how their party is against more voting and more democracy. So don't let them dissuade you, whether it's Texas or anywhere else. Still, there is some locations left, so it's not like you can't do it at all. So make sure you go ahead and do that, and enjoy the fact that the Republicans are scared to death of your votes. So right now, North Carolina, Arizona, Iowa, every Republican consultant especially for the senators, are sweating buckets, going, we're ruined because Trump talked against mail-in voting. The advantage Democrats have in mail-in voting is going to kill the entire Republican Party. I love it. You should love it. Go vote.
And one final note for voters in Texas, there are some rules when you drop off your ballots. I want to tell you what those rules are. You have to drop off your own mail-in ballot, so they don't allow ballot harvesters in Texas. So you have to show up yourself to drop off your ballot. You have to show your photo ID. They're gonna ask you to sign a roster and deposit your sealed, it must be sealed envelope into the ballot box. So those are the rules. Make sure you're aware of them and you're prepared to meet these rules when you drop off your ballots early.
So I love that we do this show together. Just while we were doing this one story, here are the folks who signed up by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Zachary Garland, LaShonda Williams, Gregory Vandenberg, Seb's Veg Meat, that's their handle, Brianne Kane, and William Milvey. Love you guys. You're the Young Turks.
Well, let's give you guys an update on what's happening with the stimulus negotiations. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have apparently re-engaged in negotiations regarding the next round of stimulus. And I say next round of stimulus, but really the future of a next round of stimulus is still uncertain. There have been some concessions by Steve Mnuchin, probably because he realized that so many of these major corporations are now doing mass layoffs, since the PPP money for small businesses has not only run out, but the rules tied to that money, which would essentially have these businesses keep their employees on staff, have expired. So now we're hearing about major companies laying off tens of thousands of people, and that's not a good look for Trump's reelection campaign. So Mnuchin's plan included $250 billion for state and local governments. Remember, that's something that they were absolutely against before, which is $186 billion less than Democrats want in their latest $2.2 trillion package, but $100 billion more than the White House offered in talks that broke down over the summer. Luckily, there's some emphasis on continuing unemployment benefits that are more robust through the help of the federal government, but it still falls short of what unemployed individuals received earlier with $600 a week. On unemployment insurance, Mnuchin proposed $400 per week in the federal benefit, retroactive to September 12th and lasting through January 1st, 2021. That's less than the $600 a week Democrats want, but $100 more than Senate Republicans have proposed. And again, Democrats have made their own concessions by lowering the cost of their initial stimulus bill to $2.2 trillion. But Mnuchin made it clear that the right wing will absolutely reject that proposal. And here he is making that statement on Fox Business.
We're not going to do a $2.2 trillion deal. The good news is the speaker has come down from her $3.4 trillion deal. If there's a fair compromise, we're prepared to do it.
A fair compromise, yet within that, as I understand the bill that could have been voted upon tonight, there would be no money now for law enforcement as there was in the earlier higher package that Pelosi had presented to you. That's now absent. It seems to be going, at least in a number of elements, the wrong direction. 2.2 is still vastly higher than the number that the president wants. What is there a median number here that is magical in terms of reaching agreement?
Well, the president instructed us to come up significantly. So we have come up from the $1 trillion deal that we had been working on earlier. He's very focused on wanting to make sure that all the people who have been impacted by COVID, no fault of their own, we're delivering relief. As I've said before, our job is not done until we get everybody back to work, and we're going to keep trying.
So Cenk, I love how Lou Dobbs is like, oh, this is going in the wrong direction. We're gonna help poor people and less funding for law enforcement. What are we doing? Like, he's such a terrible person. But anyway, go ahead.
You know, in this case, if you just cared about politics, the sides are backwards. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you're the president, you should want a stimulus bill as large as humanly possible a month before the election, so that the economy can get stimulated, whether it's overstimulated, whether it's a bubble, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether it's based on your Republican principles or not. You should want to inject as much money into the economy and honestly get all the voters $1,200 check right before the election. Are you crazy? It's a no-brainer. But they're Republicans, they can't help themselves. So they're like, I don't want to give it to average Americans. I just don't want to. And you're giving it to states and you're giving it to people who are unemployed. Can't we just give it to the rich again? Damn it, I don't want to do this deal. They're nuts not to do the deal. And then on the other side, I guess in a sense, give the Democrats credit because they really are trying to get money to all those folks, the unemployed states, et cetera, when they're kind of nuts to do the deal before the election. And I'm glad they're doing it because you got to get relief to those people. So I care 1,000 times more about the policy than I do about politics. But the opposition party giving the president a month before the election a $1,200 check to hand out to almost all Americans, it's not politically savvy. But again, I'm not blaming them for it. I think it's actually principled. I'm giving them credit for it.
I hear what you're saying, Cenk. It's just that the House had passed a stimulus bill months ago. And my issue with how Nancy Pelosi handled that situation was she thought that all she could do, or all she should do, is just simply pass a bill and then sit around and think that Americans are going to figure out that this bill is being blocked by Mitch McConnell. Like, sure, there are people who realize that, there are people who know that. Would you argue that the majority of Americans know that? Of course they don't. She had to make her case. She had to use the bully pulpit in order to basically call out the Republican Party and the fact that they've been blocking this bill for months. Instead, she was just, I don't know what she was doing, calling press conferences to talk about how a salon allegedly set her up. She'll hold a press conference for that, but she won't hold a press conference. And she should have done it on the regular, calling out Steve Mnuchin, the Trump administration, and more importantly, Mitch McConnell for blocking a more robust version of the stimulus bill much earlier. So I also want to note that the economic ramifications of Congress's inaction are pretty serious, and we're starting to see it now. So as I talked about yesterday on the show, a number of companies announced that they would be laying off tens of thousands of workers. Disney said that it'll lay off 28,000 employees across its parks, experiences, and consumer products divisions amid prolonged closures at its California-based theme parks, as well as limited attendance. And that's according to their own statement. They also say that 67% of their laid off workers were part-time. A number of their employees actually reached out to me via social media. They asked to remain anonymous, but the right-wing talking point in regard to the Disney layoffs has been, it's Gavin Newsom. He's destroying businesses by having these social distancing guidelines and urging companies and businesses to remain closed amid the pandemic. But these employees are saying, no, we want to be safe. We actually do not disagree with what Gavin Newsom wants to do. We don't want to get sick, but they obviously do need financial assistance, which Congress has really failed on. And the airline industry has laid off 30,000 employees. The list goes on and on and on. And so I think Republicans and the Trump administration realize the seriousness of this moment, not necessarily because they care about the American people and their well-being, but because this could really hurt them in this upcoming election.
So Anna, we could have reopened Disney and so many other businesses, at least the theme parks, if we had done testing and tracing, which is what the rest of the world did. I was gonna say developed world, but really almost all of the rest of the world except us. We're now basically a fourth world country, worst in deaths, worst in cases, worst in so many things. We barely do any contact tracing at all in America. Whereas New Zealand, South Korea, Taiwan are excellent at contact tracing, so is Germany. So that way you can quarantine a much smaller group of people rather than shutting down the whole economy. It's a win-win. You keep your health is better off, and so is your economic health. But you would need a smart, competent leader to do that, and not a psycho party like the Republicans in charge who don't do science and then go, screw the mask, don't worry about it. Let's just open without any precautions. So in this bill that we're talking about here, there's $75 billion for testing and tracing. So no matter what the politics of it is, I want it passed because we desperately need testing and tracing so we could reopen the economy, people can get their jobs back, and we could all go outside. There's also other great parts like rental and mortgage assistance. There's help with the airlines. There's paycheck protection program for small businesses. So, but your point on the earlier politics of it is indisputable. So I want to end on that. Guys, look, I'm giving the Democrats credit here for being principled, even though the optics of this is going to help Trump if they pass it. But it didn't have to help Trump. In fact, it should have been the opposite. If Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and every Democrat out there and Joe Biden were all out there going, why aren't you passing the bill? The bill, my God, the small businesses, the testing, the tracing, the states, $1,200 checks. We demand that Trump pass it. And we're furious that Trump and the Republicans aren't passing it. By the time Trump agreed, then he wouldn't get credit for it. People would say, the Democrats did a good job of breaking Trump and making him accept these things for the American people. But as usual, the Democrats are terrible at making their own case. So as Anna pointed out, they're talking about hair salons and Nancy Pelosi's personal business more than they are about this bill, so that when it passes, Trump will take credit for it. And people who don't follow the news closely, and those are the most important independent voters, will have no idea that the Democrats are on the right side of this.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, we have some strong Democrats because they do exist. After we come back from the break, Katie Porter takes the pharmaceutical industry to task. You don't want to miss it.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Come right back.
All right, back on the Young Turks. First of all, a message about our sponsor, Too Strong Coffee. It's organic, it's fair trade. Coffee's for causers. So if you buy 2 bags or more, they give money to Wolfpack, Just Democrats, Rebellion PAC, TYT, all things that help progressives get the message out and fight back. If you buy 3 cups or more, you get a mug, not necessarily this one, but the logo is the same, toostrongcoffee.com/TYT. So check that out. And it also tastes excellent. So now I want to go to you guys. I want to go to the member section. Eclectic Miscellanea says the media's approach to the 2020 elections. Fox News lies about the attack on voting. Rest of the mainstream media plays dumb about why it's happening or what can be done. TYT tells us what's happening, says what Dems need to do, and gives voters the information we need to vote. Thank you, but that really is true. That's almost exactly what happens. And that's why we do tyt.com/go. Part of the reason why those media companies do what they do is they're either hooked on advertising money and hence have to serve corporations. Keep it real, that's exactly what it is, okay? Or they're hooked on access to the Republican Party, Fox News, or Democratic Party, MSNBC. So tyt.com/go to power us, or and become a member if you can. tyt.com/join, like Eclectic Miscellanea did, and we read your comments more often. Or you could hit the join button below if you're on YouTube. So these are the folks who just did that: Jenny Van Vormer, Adam R., Christopher Young, Timothy Komani, Yadamane, Butchie, Bilo, Infinite Content, Dr. Hui 2016, Paul Green, Pamela Hannon, John Sivak, Shelby Goldenberg. Yes, there's a lot of you. Yes, there's a lot of all of us, and I love it. Keep it going. We keep reading your names. Last couple here are from YouTube Super Chat. William Mulvey, who just joined up in the last segment, said, I'm a disabled vet. I just joined after watching for years. Thank you for all you do. No, William, thank you for what you do, because we do this show together. And last one is, I'm Cullen 8, made a point that I forgot to make during the Texas story. Thank you for bringing it up. Saying Texas must be in play. That's exactly right. Abbott is panicking because, oh my God, the Democrats might win Texas. So that's amazing news. All right, we got a lot more for you right now.
All right, so Representative Katie Porter eviscerated Big Pharma during a recent House oversight hearing on pharmaceutical drugs and the price gouging that many Americans are certainly experiencing. Let's watch.
Do you know what this number is?
Does
it ring any bells?
I think you're referring to my compensation in some way.
Yeah, well, in some way, this was your compensation in 2017 for being CEO of Celgene, and that's a lot of money. It's 200 times the average American's income and 360 times what the average senior gets on Social Security. Now, of that 13 million, about 2.1 million came from your company hitting yearly earning targets. And more than half of the bonus formula was based on those targets. Any increase in the price of Revlimid would also increase your bonus by increasing earnings. Isn't that right, Mr. Ellis?
If revenues increased and expenses did not, then earnings would be enhanced.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis, in fact, the Oversight Committee found that if you hadn't increased the price of Revlimid, you wouldn't have gotten your bonus.
So the CEO that Representative Katie Porter was questioning in that hearing is the Celgene CEO, Mark Ellis, and apparently they had increased the cost of Revlimid, which is a cancer drug, to $763 per dose. In 2005, it cost $215 per dose.
Yeah, so first of all, Katie Porter is legend. I love what she does with the whiteboard, but the whiteboard's a nice tool because it focuses people, but really it's her line of questioning and how she logically gets to the core of the issue. And so she's pointing out, look, your bonus is tied to increased profits. Makes sense. If you're making sneakers, well, it doesn't really matter, right? If people want to buy sneakers, they'll buy sneakers. If they don't, they don't. Okay, so that no harm, no foul. But these are drugs that save people's lives. Okay, that's point one. So it's not optional. Point two is, well, if that's the cost of the drug, what can you do, right? But we know it's not the cost of the drug because they sell it at much lower prices everywhere else in the world. So what's the difference, as Katie Porter explained? Well, the difference is we are not allowed to negotiate drug prices in America on behalf of the United States government and on behalf of the US taxpayers. That's insane. It's unheard of. If a dictator said it, people would be like, okay, wait, are you in charge or are the drug companies in charge? Like, no, like I've never heard of a dictator doing it. I've never heard of a democracy doing it. Every other democracy negotiates drug prices on behalf of their taxpayers. But we have perfected corruption in America. So our government officials have surrendered to the drug companies because they give campaign contributions. And I want you to be aware, this is not partisan. The Republicans are totally bought off by the drug companies, but so are the Democrats. Now, not Katie Porter, not progressives, not just Democrats, because they don't take corporate PAC money. So they're clean and uncorrupted. At this point, honestly, they're a tiny group. They're about a dozen people. They're about to get larger because a lot more Justice Democrats won in this election cycle. But the rest of the Democratic Party take tons and tons of drug company money. Barack Obama ran ads saying that he was going to stop that practice started under Bush. He didn't. That was not remotely true. He did the same exact thing as the Republicans. Trump said he was going to stop it. He didn't. He did the same exact thing as Obama and Bush. They all give into the corruption, except for a few brave folks like Katie Porter. And what's great about her is she's courageous and incredibly effective. When she does this dressing down, he has no answer. And anyone who sees it goes, and I can't imagine even Republicans disagree. They go, yeah, that guy ripped us off and charged us more than we should have paid for life-saving medicine so that he could take home a giant bonus. And our government officials let him.
I want to go to one more video of Katie Porter questioning him.
Mr. Ellis, do you know how much you personally received in bonuses over 2 years, the last 2 years, just because Celgene raised the price of this one drug, Revlimid?
I receive very generous compensation, but I don't know the exact number that you're referring to.
In fact, you personally received $500,000 personally just by tripling the price of Revlimid. So to recap here, the drug didn't get any better. The cancer patients didn't get any better. You just got better at making money. You just refined your skills at price gouging. And to be clear, the taxpayers spent $3.3 billion on Revlimid.
That was so delicious. It's just so delicious to watch that. The look on his face, his inability to answer any of these questions. It's awesome. And to be fair, Katie Porter wasn't the only progressive in this hearing who asked tough questions. There were also some wonderful moments by Rashida Tlaib and also by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So you're right, Cenk. It's a small group, but it's a fierce group, and hopefully we can expand progressive representation in Congress.
Honestly, I don't know that Republican voters would even disagree with a word she said. Because Fox News and Trump have done no propaganda on this because they just largely ignore it because Nancy Pelosi's on their side, so they don't have to bother fighting it. So if an average voter, no matter what your party sees that, goes, yeah, okay, maybe I could live with like uber capitalism and free markets, whatever I want to say. But wait a minute. Why do they charge so much less in the UK and France and Canada and everywhere else? They're specifically ripping us off, obviously because of corruption. So look, I want to go to our viewers, our members, actually, tyt.com/join to get your comments read and get all of our coverage. The Quantum Mechanic said, I love watching Katie Porter work. If you're being questioned by her, you better have done your homework. Honestly, though, I don't think it's even gonna help you because she's right on the facts and she's gonna crush you. Cray Cray Souffle wrote in, don't you just love how Katie Porter makes corporate and political hacks feel like uber dunce caps? We're so blessed to have her in Congress. Yes, I do love it. It's cathartic and it's true. And I hope to God one day it has an effect. Lastly, Jorge the Frog writes in, play our cards right and we could be talking Senator Khanna and Senator Porter in less than 4 years. I actually think you're thinking too small. I think these folks are amazing and they can go higher and higher. We need our stars to rise up as quickly as possible. Look, unfortunately, MSNBC and CNN gives coverage to all the corporate Democrats. We need to feature progressive Democrats a lot more because they're saying amazing things and they're uncorrupted.
Well, let's move on to an update on what happened to the Los Angeles sheriff's deputies and the suspect who ambushed and shot them. So a few weeks ago, there was an awful ambush attack on 2 Los Angeles sheriff deputies in Los Angeles. They were in a patrol vehicle when an individual approached the car and shot both of them in the head. Miraculously, both of them have survived and are recovering at home, and a suspect has finally been arrested. Now, there were a lot of people speculating about who the suspect was or what motivated this attack, but it appears to just be a criminal, and authorities haven't said anything specific about a motive. The suspect is a 36-year-old by the name of Deontay Lee Murray, who had actually previously committed a crime and was arrested and charged with connection to a carjacking in Linwood, California. Now, the LA sheriff, Alex Villanueva, said in a press conference that this cowardly ambush was followed by bystanders celebrating and cheering that the deputies had been shot, and that followed at the hospital. Let me also be clear about something. There were a few people doing that, but it was not a crowd. It was like 4 or 5 people. What they were doing was disgusting, but that was in no way representative of any type of movement or any way connected to the protesters. If you watch the videos, it's 4 or 5 people being unbelievably ridiculous. And so to focus on that, I think is irresponsible, especially given the fact that the suspect appears to have no connection to Black Lives Matter. Anyway, Villanueva continues to say the quiet sanctity of the hospital with protesters cheering and chanting for the deputies to die. These acts and that day, I will not forget it. And it represents the worst in humanity, and it shocked the whole nation. And that evening I said, we will find this man, and I can report today we have found our suspect. So how did they find him? Well, the suspect had done a carjacking prior to the ambush attack against the two sheriff deputies. Through surveillance video, they were able to identify that vehicle. Luckily, he had already been arrested for that carjacking. And so they were able to get him not only for the carjacking, but also they tied that vehicle to the previous carjacking and were able to also get him on charges of what he allegedly did to these two sheriff deputies. Kurt Wegener, who is heading the investigation, said this about a possible motive. Sheriff's Homicide Bureau Captain Kent Wegener, who detailed the investigation, did not suggest a specific motive for the attack other than the fact that he obviously hates policemen and he wants them dead. Cenk.
Okay, so why did the sheriff bother mentioning the 4 rando protesters at the hospital?
We know.
Okay, I'll tell you why. It's because when the shooting first happened, he came out and demagogued and said, "Oh my God, this is at the hands of the people who were leading protests against police," and he blamed a huge amount of people, including LeBron James, for the shooting of the policeman. So now it turns out, oops, the shooting had nothing to do with protesters or Black Lives Matter or Antifa or George Floyd or anything else. This guy has a giant criminal track record, guns and crimes left and right, wild, out of control guy. By the way, I'm thrilled that they caught him. He not only because of justice; those are 2 human beings that he shot. It's an outrage. But he was also a maniac, totally out of control, loaded up with weapons. And so I'm glad he's off the street, and I'm glad they did their job well in this case in catching him. But has no political connection whatsoever. So in order to not be embarrassed after calling out people like LeBron James, the sheriff comes out and is like, "Oh yeah, I mean, so the guy's like a random criminal. But anyways, remember the 3 or 4 guys that showed up at the hospital? Okay, don't blame me. Just do your job. Just do your job and take credit for catching the guy, which is a great thing. And don't bother bringing back politics into it because you're embarrassed that you were totally wrong."
Well, I mean, look, in the state of California, there have been attacks on police that are politically motivated, but they're politically motivated by right-wing extremists like the Boogaloo Boys. Just this past summer, there was an ambush on cops in Northern California committed by Boogaloo Boys. And so we keep seeing these instances of right-wing individuals carrying out these acts of violence against law enforcement, but we never, have any type of national reckoning about it. We don't have 24/7 media coverage on it. It gets covered by local news sources for maybe half a day, and then everyone moves on. And so when we keep hearing the demagoguing about Black Lives Matter or allegedly these leftist groups who are carrying out acts of terror in this country, just know what the reality is and what the truth is. The police have been targeted violently by specific individuals who have right-wing ideologies.
Yeah, and by the way, Proud Boys who are apparently standing by, according to Donald Trump, ready to do violence after the election, who would they do violence against? Well, if Trump says, well, okay, I lost, but I don't want to lose, I'm not going to recognize the votes. Proud Boys, remember how I told you to stand by? Now go and do violence so that we can just keep this government by force. Well, they wouldn't be doing it to the left. At that point, the left isn't what's relevant. What's relevant is that Donald Trump has lost the election. Hence, the rest of the government apparatus would say, "Sir, you got to leave the building." So at that point, whether it's Boogaloos, Proud Boys, or any other far right-wing militia, they would be attacking cops and the military. And these are the guys who pretended to be offended because Colin Kaepernick took a knee. Meanwhile, they're currently plotting how to potentially kill police and military officers.
Well, speaking of Trump, when we come back from the break, we have an update on the type of campaigning he's relying on to drum up his base, and it has to do with attacking Ilhan Omar. So we have that story and more for you when we return.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, all of your comments. So let's go to our members first. Mishi58 writes, and my father was on Revlimid for a few years. I'm in Canada. Monthly drug cost was $850. Across the border in Detroit, the same monthly dose was $8,500. That's insane. It's a couple of mile difference. The only difference is in Canada, they don't have legalized bribery. Here, we have legalized bribery. Just wolf-pack.com/go. I mean, you've got to get involved. If you don't, we're never going to win with these corrupt politicians. We got to get an amendment. Obviously, Supreme Court's gone. Okay, folks who just signed up on YouTube on YouTube membership: Rohit Singh 83, Sean Cook, Julio Bracero Rodriguez MD, Christina Vladi, Tim Thompson, Adam L, and April Chopson. Hit the join button below to become a member. Love you guys. You make this show possible. YouTube super chat. Ray Raleigh says, why are we not including Katie Porter in the squad? She was a freshman at the same time. There's a literal answer to that. The squad were all Justice Democrats. Unfortunately, Katie wasn't. She should be, but she wasn't. So that's why this squad is who they are. But Katie Porter's just as good as any of them. She's wonderful. Lonely Soul says, once Katie Porter pulls her out her board, you're getting schooled. That's totally true. The minute she grabs for the board, I'm like, yes. Okay. And new subs on Twitch are Basho100, Deltana788, Papa Chango, and Lieutenant Mac McGee and Otto Naomi gifted subs. We love you for doing that. Thank you. I got Between Me and Uygur with Ravi Patel tonight. He's got a new HBO Max show, The Pursuit of Happiness. Check that out, twitch.tv/TYT. And thank you to everybody giving bits too. You guys are wonderful. Last thing is, guys, we got a little bit more money at tyt.com/go. It's what allows us to remain strong, keep all of our employees and do the work that you see. 9,615. We'd love to see 10,000 by the end of the show. tyt.com/go. Thank you, guys. Anna.
All right. Well, we have a little bit of breaking news for you guys. Conservative operatives Jacob Wall and Jack Berkman have been charged on a number of election crimes, which I'll detail for you in just a minute. These charges were announced by the Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who mentioned the slew of charges having to do with robocalls that were organized by these two. The robocalls were targeted toward minority voters, many of whom reside in Michigan, Detroit specifically, and it spread all sorts of disinformation about mail-in ballots, alleging that the mail-in ballots were essentially going to be used against the voters, and it was a violation of their privacy. So the voice on the call attributed to Wall and Berkman and their attempts to trick listeners into not sending in their mail-in ballots, falsely warning that the information would be used to track fugitives, collect on credit card debts, and enforce mandatory vaccines. The calls also told residents to beware of vote by mail. So they were doing everything they can to suppress the vote and to scare voters away from voting by mail. And so the charges, they're both facing 4 felony counts and 24 years in prison. That's the maximum sentence, and it's for violating election laws in the state of Michigan.
Okay, so my first reaction to this is finally I mean, we have asked about on half a dozen wildly illegal schemes these two have done. Why haven't they been arrested yet? I mean, are there any laws that apply to the right wing at all? Will they ever be enforced? So finally, somebody said, enough is enough. They're apparently doing this scheme not just in Michigan, but across the country. About 85,000 calls have gone out. In this case, they say all the calls, according to the Daily Beast, they said were made to residents in, quote, urban areas with significant minority populations, according to the Michigan Attorney General. Now, get a load of what these clowns said. So they have all of these false information that Anna told you, including comical things like mandatory vaccines, but mainly scaring people about credit card debt. And look at their assumptions about minorities, by the way, and you're gonna get arrested, etc. But my favorite line was this one: don't be BS'd into giving your private information to the man. Oh God, you guys are embarrassing, man. I mean, because these idiots think, oh, that's how black people talk. Oh, don't do it, man. And how did they get caught? That clown Berkman, he had the robocalls attached to his personal cell phone number. They're so
it's amazing.
Dumb. They're the dumbest people in the world.
They really are. It's amazing how dumb they are. So Berkman denied being behind the robocall, claiming it was suspicious that it was connected to his personal cell phone number. And he said no one in their right mind would put their own cell on a robocall. No, but you guys would. I mean, they've gotten caught with so many ridiculous stunts, including attempting to incriminate various people like Comey, for instance, by offering to pay women to drum up fake allegations of sexual misconduct against them. The women who were contacted by them spoke to the press, and they're like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. That's ridiculous. And I don't remember the exact context in which Jacob Wall was pretending to be a security guard by using Apple AirPods, but it was hilarious. I mean, he's a joke, he's a clown, and he's been in trouble over and over again for these types of stunts.
Anna, let me just clarify. It wasn't what Wall was speaking. He got like this 4-foot dude to stand behind him with an iPod piece and pretending to be like almost like Secret Service, right? And it was just one of the funniest sights we've ever seen. And then remember, like Berkman saying, like, who would attach their own number to a robocall, thereby making it easy to get caught? When one of their first schemes, they got caught because they had set up a dummy corporation, which is a fitting title in this case, and it got tracked back to Jacob Wall's mom's house. These are the world's worst criminals. By the way, this is serious stuff. You're doing illegal voter suppression. I know we're used to the Republican Party doing it on a mass scale, but this form of it is not legal. And it carries a 24-year maximum sentence. So I don't see any reason why the authorities should let up on these guys at all. After all the law breaking that they have done, can we finally get some justice?
Well, one more story for you before we have to wrap up the first hour. So a day after Donald Trump absolutely refused to condemn white supremacy in America, he appeared at a campaign stop in Minnesota, at the Duluth airport specifically, where he hurled all sorts of typical xenophobic rants against people of color, but in particular, Somali refugees. And that's relevant because Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is from Minnesota, is a Somalian refugee. And so let's hear what he has to say in his disgusting rant during his rally.
Another massive issue for Minnesota is the election of Joe Biden's plan to inundate your state with a historic flood of refugees. And what about Omar, where she gets caught harvesting? What the hell is going on? I hope your U.S. attorney is involved. What is going on with Omar? I've been reading these reports for 2 years about how corrupt and crooked she is. Let's get with it. Let's get with it. I mean, frankly, harvesting's terrible, but it's the least of the things that she has done. How the hell? Then she tells us how to run our country. Can you believe it?
So what he's referring to there was a video put out by Project Veritas, which is not to ever be taken seriously by rational people. Project Veritas is known to spread disinformation campaigns. They have heavily doctored and edited videos to make it appear as though some sort of crime is being committed or some sort of illegal act is being committed, when in reality, the truth is further from what they're presenting. And this was a disinformation campaign that was promoted by Tulsi Gabbard, someone who paraded around as some sort of progressive, when in reality, she is in many ways extreme and an extremist in supporting Narendra Modi and his slaughter of Muslims in India. And I don't think it's any surprise that she promoted Project Veritas's disgusting video, which specifically targeted Ilhan Omar, who is a Muslim and a Somalian refugee.
All right, so look, the worst part of that was when he said, who's she to tell us what to do with our country? What do you mean our country? She's a United States Congresswoman. What do you mean our country? See, look, guys, there's really no debate as to whether Donald Trump supports white supremacists. It's Thursday. He refused to denounce them in the debate on Tuesday. He's had all this time. He still won't speak out clearly against white supremacists. But you don't even need that. Look at the way that he talks on a regular basis. Our country means it's for white people. It's not for a Somali immigrant who's now a US citizen, which means she is 100% American, who's now in Congress representing nearly 1 million Americans. Nope, but she's not really American. It's not really her country because she's black, she's Somali, she's Muslim. So the white supremacy is not hidden at all. It's completely plain to the naked eye. But it's not just Donald Trump. Did you hear that crowd? Now, that's what separates TYT from the rest of the media. Mainstream media will go tut tut, can you believe that? And then they'll move on. But they'll also be like a subtle thing of like, yeah, but it's Ilhan Omar, right? No, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. So like if he'd said that Joe Biden's not a real American, it's not his country, there'd be a much bigger uproar. Now I get it, they're in the middle of a presidential debate, but if he'd said it a contest, but if he said it about someone other than Ilhan Omar, I think there'd actually be far more outrage. But even if you say, okay, I'll give the media that, at least they pointed it out. They never talk about the crowd. And the reality is that crowd loved that racist talk. So Trump supporters, fans, and voters are at least as guilty as Donald Trump. Part of the reason Donald Trump is doing it is because it works so well with his base. So, if something else worked better, he's a con artist. He doesn't really care. He's just giving back what he's seeing from the crowd so that you'll support him. And what he's seeing from the crowd is deep racism, and he's playing the hits back to them, and that's why they're cheering wildly as he spews that bigotry, plain as day in front of everybody.
So you're right, and this is really what he relies on. This is the red meat that he relies on for his base. And in Minnesota, Trump isn't doing so well based on polling. So I just want to go to this graph from 538 that shows that Biden does in fact have a lead 48-42 in the state of Minnesota. So that's what Trump is relying on to drum up his base. Post game is next. Don't miss it. TYT.com/join.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.